A conservative radio host turned politician is under fire for apparently supporting slavery. This is amazing. Now, this is a man named Jason Lewis, and he is currently seeking the state GOP's endorsement for Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District. Now, Lewis has written some very controversial things in his book, and he's of course made statements on his radio show that are now being called out by the Republican deputy chairman of Minnesota. Now, let's go through some of these statements because they are pretty bad. Now, the Star Tribune reports that in 2009, he said that, quote, real Americans thought Hurricane Katrina victims were, quote, a bunch of whiners. Oh, you Katrina victims. You're whiners. Shut up, black people. Quit whining. Now, why do I say black people? Well, because that's a majority of people who were caught up in Hurricane Katrina. Remember that hit New Orleans, a large African-American population. He's essentially saying, oh, you're a victim? You're a victim of a natural disaster where FEMA literally failed you under the George W. Bush administration. Well, you need to shut up and quit whining. So what, your home got, washed out. Oh, you lost all your possessions and everything. Pff, quit whining. Real Americans think you're a whiner. Real Americans like, apparently, Jason Lewis. All right. It gets worse. He also said last year that the median income for blacks in America would make them rich in most African nations. Not most, all. Oh, what are you black people complaining about? In Africa, you'd be rich. So stop bitching and be thankful to your benevolent masters for allowing you to live in America. After all, white people, in his words, are committing cultural and political suicide by not having as much babies in comparison to the other ethnic groups. So we're lucky that you're even here and that you're allowed to reproduce. Because us white people are committing cultural genocide because we're not having as many babies as you. So basically this guy has already shown that he's one of those white genocide whack jobs. Great. There's more. He's also anti-woman. He says that, quote, women are simply ignorant of the important issues in life. You're ignorant. And that young women, he said, were even worse. Quote, they're literally non-thinking. They don't think. No, you're only there to look pretty. Because obviously you have no grasp of the important issues, and you're non-thinking. Can you see what part of the electorate he's going for? I do. But he's not done. In his audiobook bonus commentary, ooh, there's a bonus, he talks about same-sex marriage and makes a comparison to slavery. Watch. Or listen, I should say. In fact, if you really want to be quite frank about it, how does somebody else owning a slave affect me? It doesn't. If I don't think it's right, I won't own one. And people always say, well, if you don't want to marry someone of the same sex, you don't have to. But why tell someone else they can't? If you don't want to own a slave, don't. But don't tell other people they can't. You see how he's using that argument? Like, hey, you don't believe in gay marriage, don't get gay married. Makes sense. Oh yeah, well, if I want to own a slave and you don't, well, you don't have to own a slave, but I can. So let me get this straight. Bob down the street wants to marry Joe. Okay, well, that's fine. You can do that. But I also want to own a slave. So it's essentially the same thing, right? I get my slave and Bob and Joe and get married. And maybe later I can enslave Bob and Joe's kid that they adopt. No, that's not how it works, dude. That's not how this shit works. That is probably one of the most ridiculous arguments I've ever heard. He's essentially saying, look, it's freedom. If you gays can get married, then why can't I own a human being? It's freedom. America. Once again, that's not how this whole thing works. Remember, not freedom for the slave. He's essentially comparing apples to dump trucks. It's not a good comparison. You don't have the right to deny someone else rights, much less own them. It's not the same thing. This guy is so extreme that, as I mentioned, the Republican deputy chair, who, by the way, is an African American, said that these statements were, quote, contradictory to the values Republicans share and principles the party is founded upon. He also said that, quote, provocative statements like these demonstrate ignorance, a lack of sensitivity, and they exacerbate the racial divisions in America. I will go a step further, and I will say that that is the understatement of the year. I don't think you're quite harsh enough on this guy. He wants to enslave you. I'm just saying. Now, interestingly enough, when asked if he thought that Lewis's past comments would hinder his ability to win the election, Fields declined to comment. But he did say Republicans in the 2nd Congressional District have a wide array of candidates that share their values and are capable of winning in November. Now, earlier he had also said that, look, I can't make him bow out. He's in the race whether or not I want him to be in the race, and I really don't. But don't worry, at least Republicans have a choice. But here's the thing. He said, once again, do you think his comments will hurt him? I can't say. Meaning that, look, I know there's a lot of racist Republicans out there that actually love what he has to say. So do I think it'll hurt his chances? I'm not going to mention anything. Because after all, as much as I don't like it, we kind of still need your votes. Oh, man. Look, that's the way I perceive things. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. What I do know is that that answer doesn't exactly inspire confidence that the voters will choose one of the non-racist candidates in Minnesota.